What's going on, my planting people? I'm going to show you a plant that I have probably only spoken about on this channel once or twice, and that plant lives and has been living in this bag for the best part of a year. Crazy, I know. So I know you're wondering, what plant could this be that has been living in this bag for all this time? And it's the Anthurium that I have struggled with the most. It's this thing. This thing has been an absolute nightmare. An absolute nightmare. And you know what? I'm not the only one on YouTube or in social media spaces that complains about just how tough this plant is to care for. And this plant is none other than my Anthurium Regale. This is a pure Regale. Now, I'm going to rewind and give you a bit of background on this plant, where it sort of started and my journey with it. So I bought this as a chunk. It was quite a big, substantial chunk that I bought, quite cheap. At the time, Regales were all the rage. I bought one and it grew quite well. I managed to get it to sprout, and it sprouted 2 shoots. I'm going to include some very choppy footage here so you can kind of see what we were working with. It's not very clear, but you know, it gives you an idea. So I thought, yeah, look, we're going off to a great start. So we got 2 shoots. What I'm going to do is I'm going to chop one off and have it growing separately to sort of nurture that and have a separate plant, and then allow the chunk to focus on one shoot to just grow and keep on growing. And that worked well until it didn't, right? Both of those plants, they were doing quite well. They grew quite large. And when I say quite large, maybe to about 4 inches, 5 inches sort of size. So quite substantial leaves from where it came from. You know, it came from a chunk. So I was quite proud to sort of see it grow that large, and surprisingly that quickly as well, to the point where I was getting ready to actually sell one of the cuttings, and then that was it. That's when the fun ended, right? So these plants both started to decline. So I literally just noticed today that my Anthurium Regale has died back to a stump. I've just cut off many of its roots, the old leaf. This is what I have left, so I'm going to stick it in some moss, put it under grow light and see what happens. It's a sad day for this Anthurium. So here's what we've done. We've added a bit of moss, very lightly damp. I don't want it to be too damp because it was in pond and the pond was really damp. So just a bit of time for the roots to dry up, but not enough to kill them, to dehydrate them. I'm going to cover it in some plastic wrap just so that it maintains that humidity. We're going to put it back in the greenhouse and hope for the best. This one only has a very tiny chunk that it's growing from, so there's not lots and lots of energy to pull from. So I had this one, stuck it in some sphagnum moss, put a sort of a plastic wrap over it, and I just sort of forgot about it. The larger chunk, I put it into perlite, well, it was actually pond, and I left it there, and it was there for months. I literally threw the plant out maybe, I think it was last month, so it wasn't very long ago, because the thing was just, it was still firm, it hadn't rotted. I honestly thought the plant would have rotted and have died off by now and gone soft. In fact, it sort of just stayed, it just remained quite strong, and possibly could have put out a new growth. But honestly, after having it for about a year and having nothing happened with it, and it was in this grow tent, it was taking up some valuable space, I just decided to get rid of it. Honestly, I didn't have the space to take on an additional stressed plant, so I just threw it in the bin and just let it do what it's doing out in nature, right? But then this one has had a slightly different background. So last time you saw this plant, this is what it looked like before. It's a tiny one now. This one is my Anthurium Regale, just a little baby at the moment. Just a baby.
It's just a baby.
I got this as a chunk, just a chunk, and I've grown it out. The chunk is not doing too well, so I didn't bring it out. I think it's rotting, but this little seedling here has survived, or the cutting from the trunk has survived. When I cut it off, it only had this leaf, so it has put out this one as well, and it looks a little bit pregnant on the bottom. There's a bit of swelling there, so hopefully we get another leaf very, very soon. This plant is very, very fussy. I can confirm what other YouTubers have said. It does require a lot of humidity, and it's a very particular kind of care that it requires, but mainly it's around humidity levels. If you keep it high, this plant will love you for it. But unfortunately, a lot of us don't have the kind of humidity that this plant would love. So at the moment, the fact that this is in a semi-hydro setup means that it is getting constant access to water in its roots. So as it loses it through the air, through the leaves, it can quickly replace that. So it seems to be okay, all things considered. And yeah, once I have this plant grown up a little bit more, I can come back with a more in-depth and thorough review of this plant. But for now, this is the Anthurium Regale. So you can see what I'm talking about, right? So this plant has gone through quite a change. It went from that leaf, that substantial sort of leaf, and then it died back to just a chunk. So I had this plant covered up in sort of high humidity, just so that it could sort of just recover and do its thing. And then I remember moving it from the grow tent where it had like really, really small leaves, sort of like the ones down here. They were very, very tiny, and it had two of them. And I decided to put it, when I was trying to rescue my Queen Anthurium at the same time, I put them both into the same baggie and I placed it on a heat mat. What happened was the heat mat actually dried out the moss completely dried out the moss, and it meant that I lost those two leaves. So I thought, that's it, this is the end of this plant. But again, I noticed that the chunk that it was growing from was still firm. So I thought, okay, I've got some space in the grow tent, let's chuck it in there. And that is when I placed it into this sandwich bag, and I just left it. Honestly, guys, I haven't even watered this again, and it's been a good few months, definitely over half a year, probably approaching a year, that it's just sat in this bag, in this grow tent, under the grow light, and I have done nothing else to it. I look at it, I literally get the bag, I pick it up, I look at the plant, I see that it's growing, and I put it back. This is the first time this thing has had access to fresh air in a very long time. And you know what? That might even do it. That might be the end of this plant, right? Because, gosh, it is struggling. It has struggled. Now, in the whole time I've had this plant, since it sort of had the massive decline, this is the biggest and most vigorous it's grown. So you can see that we've got some large leaves that have come through, and that is great. And I don't want to stop this plant from growing the way that it's growing, and I don't want to change its surroundings and its growing conditions too much. I think with regales, they're well known as very, very, very fussy plants. That, you know, they literally are the fiddle leaf figs of anthuriums. You move it away from the light that it's used to, or the humidity that it's used to, and honestly, it's just going to rebel. So I don't know what to do. So I'm thinking I'm going to let this plant grow out a little bit more before. That's my original thought. I'm thinking about letting it grow out a little bit before putting it into pond. I think pond has always worked well. It did work well for this until it didn't. So I'm just sort of toying with that idea now. So what I'm doing now is I'm just looking to see what the root situation is. I can't see any. Oh, I can see some roots on the surface there. So we do have some roots coming in. We do. So that does look good. That does look promising. Am I gonna risk it, guys? Am I gonna risk it and try to repot this thing, or am I just gonna leave it as it is until it grows a bit bigger and probably a little bit more resilient to fluctuating humidity levels, and especially as we're going into the winter months? Should I risk it? Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. You know what? I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to repot this into this pot. I'm using a clear pot because I want to keep an eye on the roots, and this one is perfect because it's the right size. It's not too big, it's not too small. I think the plant should be okay in here. Famous last words, apparently. Okay, so here we go. We've got the regale over here, got our pot, got our washed pond. I'm reusing this from another project. So the first thing I'm going to do is just very, very carefully remove the plant from the pot. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to grab as wide and as much of the moss as possible. And from here you can already see that we've got some roots. Here's one over here, so that's a very good sign. I'm making a bit of a mess, but never mind. I'm just letting the moss fall. Whatever falls, I imagine is not connected to the root system, so I'm just gonna put it to a side over here. So here we go. After a year's growth, this is what we've got to show for this plant. Have a look at that. This is it. We've got, at least it's good because both of them have their own root system. So this root system belongs to this offshoot on this side over here, these two, this one and that one here, and then these 3 leaves, 1, 2 and 3, has 2 roots coming out over here. So that's good news, I guess. What I'm gonna do now is I'm not gonna spend too much time removing all of the moss from the roots. In my experience, you don't need to do that to have a successful transition over. It's good to take off as much as you can, but often it doesn't. In my experience, anyway, I don't have any negative effects when I leave just a little bit of soil or material, growing material on the roots. So I'll put this to the side for now. I'm not gonna put any holes in this container. You can see this is actually reused. This was a food container. I think I had some strawberry jelly in here actually and I've used it because I think it's perfect. But I'm not gonna make any holes here because I'm gonna put this back in the bag. Only thing I'm going to be changing is the substrate from moss to pon. So I think that's a big enough change, and I'm going to leave it in the baggie until I see some roots growing, and then I'll slowly try to transition it out. So I'm going to leave it like this, and because it's in the bag, I think drainless works best because I can just leave the reservoir in the pot rather than have a separate thing. And you know, if you follow the likes of Jasmina Lowe, you can see that she grows a lot of her plants, a lot of her anthuriums in a drainless container, and she has excellent results. So as always, just going to add a layer of material. I'm going to add it to about a third of the way up. Going to grab my plant, place it in the pot, try to center it as much as possible, just like that, and then backfill. I really should do it over the pot, shouldn't I? And then I'll save myself the hassle of having to clean up. I'm just going to give the plant a little tap just to secure those roots in place, just like so. I think that's going to do it for now. So the plant is back in its home where I know it does well. We're going to see what happens. I'll keep an eye on it, and as soon as there's something to update you on, I'll be back with another video. But that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, keep planting.